Well, good morning, everybody. Here's a bit of a quicker view of the things we're watching over the next couple of weeks, both in North and South America. And we're going to start off with the latest precipitation. Amounts right now in parts of Texas, getting back to Mexico, the Panhandle of Oklahoma, and then Kansas and Colorado have been quite impressive. Some of these places have already grabbed more than a month and a half's worth of precipitation for this time of year, especially in this section of Texas. And so we also want to know how much snow kind of came in with this as well. And over the last 6 hours, from midnight to early this morning, we did pack in some places another 3 to 4 inches. Now, the snowfall forecast is a bit tricky out of this system, as it is with the little clipper that's coming on the northern side of it as this all moves toward the east coast. If we just take a look at where the current all hazards weather map is suggesting the risks are, we've got our winter storm warning still in place for New Mexico and Colorado, and then these last 2 counties here in parts of Oklahoma and Texas, and then surrounding it winter weather advisories. In the west, we do have some dense fog early this morning. So I thought we'd just pick it right up with the high-res models and see where this is all heading. So overnight last night, up until right about when I'm recording this is the way things look. There's a little bit of mixed precip in here. I saw this morning in the surface obs, but this low is pretty slow moving. And the big reason for that, large area of high pressure sitting out to the east of it, and the flow is going over the top. That's why we call that a cutoff. So as we play this forward through tonight, getting into early tomorrow morning, playing this out through tomorrow midday, and working our way into Friday evening, we do notice that there's a combination of 2 systems with this. There's a clipper coming down from the north, which is going to possibly spread a little bit of light snow right in through this area. That's been a development in the last 24 hours in the models. And our low to the south just continues to plow forward. It goes over the lower Mississippi River Valley. So it's going to take about 55 hours for it to go from New Mexico to the Mississippi River, and that's a pretty slow-moving low. Now, where does this all end up after that? Well, we need to take a look at how heavy the rainfall is going to be up the East Coast in a moment. But first, I want to give you some ideas on this snow. So what we're looking at here is over the next 3 days, who's got the best chance at grabbing 2 inches of snow. And so this is the probability map, and I'm trying to show you the 2 different areas. So here and then parts of the upper Midwest. If we take a look at individual model runs, I'll show you here. This is just the next 60 hours from the European. And it's just to point out that as this low moves east, you're going to have to watch on the back side for some really wet snowflakes to possibly mix in here. And they could be adding up. It'll be brief, but there could be some snow adding up. I think the heavy snows are going to be back in New Mexico, though. I don't have a lot of confidence in any snowfall forecast for this system or the one coming across the north, because there's the chance for lighter snow to move all in this area. And even in parts of northern Wisconsin, it could pick up a decent amount of snow. That's what some of the other models are suggesting, but I'm showing you the European model just here through Saturday early morning. Now, after this, we need to pay attention to where the models are handling the low that's off the west coast, the one that's going to be adding the rainfall into northern California, plus some Sierra Nevada snow. And then what happens as this low moves itself toward the southeast, brings in some very heavy rain into Florida, and then rolls up the east coast. There's a kicker system on the back side that's going to be timed such that it should arrive behind the low, not plowing into it, which could enhance the system rolling up the east coast. What I want to show you is 5 different models. So this is the WPC. Next, we're going to look at the European 7-day forecast. Biggest trend, wetter, farther inland, right in through here, especially into Georgia and the Carolinas. The GFS out 7 days has been very consistent with bringing the heavier rainfall in here and then rolling this up the east coast. It's also been consistent with what's going on in California as well. So the comparison between the European and the GFS will kind of rock back and forth. European, GFS has been pretty consistent. We still have 2 new models to talk about, though. The first is the Fuxi machine learning. I just want to point out that it is continuing to be wet into parts of the southeast up into this section of the Carolinas. And just as a reminder, we're talking about 50 to 100 millimeters of rainfall, 50 millimeters being about 2 inches in total. So there's the chances for quite a bit of rainfall here. You can also see it's consistent in the west coast too. And this is the GraphCast. Interestingly enough, the GraphCast is drier in Alabama and parts of Georgia compared to all of the other models right now. That's what's going to be important to watch, because I've made a case that this model's been doing pretty darn good. Let's quickly get an idea on the timing. So what we're going to look at here is the GFS. These are the operational runs compared to the European model. So we've already seen in the high-res models to about this point. Now notice once we go from Saturday into Sunday, the GFS is quicker at bringing the heavier rains into in Alabama and Georgia. The European is slower. It's producing a big system over parts of Florida with very strong winds with this as well. This is going to be a rough weekend for Florida overall. Then the system rolls up the east coast. Much better agreement, although the European is not nearly as wet as the GFS is here. Look at the difference but they're both bringing in heavy rains to the Carolinas and eventually through Virginia, and the system rolls up the East Coast. Now, while that happens, this broader trough feature is sitting off the West Coast. You can see that by early next week, we're bringing in some decent coastal precipitation. What I'm unsure of is the snow and its extent on the back side of this low as it rolls farther into parts of the Canadian Maritimes. After that, there is a cutoff that's sitting here. The GFS has got it closer to California than the European does, so they're already going to kind of differ a bit in the precipitation for California. And all of this is ahead of, this big West Coast event that might be happening in and around Christmas. So what does all that mean? Well, I'm just going to give you a 2-week outlook. Did you notice I didn't talk at all about the Northern Plains or the Canadian Prairie or even really much about the upper Midwest? And the issue here is that the flow over the next couple of weeks is being dominated by northwest direction. And that's just the wrong direction. We talked about it a lot. Now, what's coming into the West Coast? Where are these chances of getting some potentially very heavy precipitation? If I show you who's going to be the wettest, oops, we just switched to new model runs. Sorry about that. Let's go back, grab the 0Z, and I want to take you out there a little farther than this. So let's go precipitation probabilities, 2 inches. There we go. And let's get back out to 10 days, a little bit beyond. There you go. So who's wettest? This corridor and California. Okay? What's happening, though, by the time we get out there to when that jet extends, is the Gulf of Alaska / Alaskan trough has pushed everything farther to the south. So the flow's coming over the top like this and then meeting up with the subtropical jet. That's why we're drier in this area. See the ridging? See the northwest flow? Versus where the flow is much stronger zonally in this area. The jet extension looks something like this just a couple of days after Christmas. And what I don't like to see is how far it makes it before it splits. That's what's going to be confusing in the longer term forecast. So could we get some big moisture into California? Absolutely. Could this roll into the southern plains? You bet. In fact, that's what all the week 2 models are suggesting. See that? But what about the Northwest? What about the Canadian Prairie? What about, the Midwest? We have to wait to see what Lee cyclogenesis looks like in order to understand that. Okay, so moving on. Longer range. It's a repeat of this through mid-January. And you say, why? I think it's because the MJO has stalled and we're not able to get the Gulf of Alaska / Alaskan trough out. So we're going to see a lot of what we've been seeing continuing. That means that drier areas here might continue to stay drier, while we do expect some kind of repair in the forecast for California with that strong onshore flow getting there. I'll be watching Arizona most carefully to see if we can get the moisture to sneak down into Arizona as well. Okay, on the temperature side of it, here is your next 5 days. Day 5 through 10, day 10 through 15. That's a lot of mild air. There will be brief shots at colder air, don't get me wrong. But when you average it over 5 days, the quickness in the returning of the mild air tends to dominate. And this, of course, takes you through Christmas right here. So a lot of the central part of Canada, the Midwest, very mild. We could be a little cooler on the coasts, but overall, that's what we're seeing. So where is all the cold air staying? Well, all the way out there to almost the end of this year, it's here now. And the problem is you bring in cold air to these two spots, you're going to get mild air in the other 2 spots when you look at the northern hemisphere as a pinwheel. Rotate that 90 degrees and we're in business for both us and Russia, okay? From here, one last thing to talk about, that's South America. I don't have a different story here. The flow is still coming out of the subtropics. The heaviest rains are in Argentina. This is the European model 10-day forecast. That's European model 15-day anomaly, and this is the GFS. Please don't look at these maps and see the drier colors, meaning completely dry. There is rain in here. It's just well below the climatological average. And the last bit of the story is that the models, remember back in early December, wanted to bring heavy rains toward the end of the month. That was the forecast from December 5th. The latest update has trended significantly drier. With the stalling of the MJO and the pull of moisture from the subtropics rather than the tropics, we're struggling to get good monsoonal moisture back into South America. And it's getting hot there this week as well again. So we'll leave you off there and then talk to you again in the morning. Thanks.